Hey, bud.
What's up?
What else? What? Nothing else.
Well,
Wow. Welcome to Public Access America. My name is Jason. I'm the one with egg on my face this week. I was listening to our episode Thursday, and the first thing I said was, I don't want to talk about Russia. Russia is going to be what it's going to be.
well,
And a week later, I feel like I got to boot up my ass. A big, giant communist boot up my ass.
yeah, I think well, that's just it. This
Mhm.
is a really unfortunate situation, and you know, I know we go into every week kind of like, yeah, we'll just talk about whatever comes up. Well,
Mhm.
sometimes you get something that comes up so big that you're just not ignoring it. You
Well,
can't.
the thing is um we have a listenership audience in Russia. Like,
Hmm.
I know a lot of rural Russia doesn't get internet access, but St. Petersburg, Moscow, a lot of those people get our podcast. They have access to it. And if we
Hmm.
have a chance of flying under a radar that CNN and MSNBC can't,
Right.
then I'm happy to give that a try. I what I did was I took Vladimir Zelensky's speech to the Russian people and I made that a TikTok and I asked people to share it because I just think it's that important that the Russian
Hmm.
people get a little bit of perspective here because this is a giant moment in the access of democracy and communism. And I'm just going to let you talk about it initially.
Oh, this is one of those things like, how often I've said, governments just need to leave each other the fuck alone. And
Yeah.
this is one of those things where I hate saying I'm right. And the reason I hate saying I'm right is because, you and I both know the people of these various countries, hell, even in our own country, nobody wants to go to war. Nobody thinks that's fucking cool, or nobody thinks that's going to be, a walk in the park. We all, like, especially, as Americans, in the last 20 years, we either know people or we know people who've lost somebody in a war.
Well, there's a segment of our population that really is like war horny. You know what I mean? They want to play war, they want to imitate war, but they don't
Absolutely.
really know what war is. I think Ukraine is changing that. When you see scenes of yards, gas stations, freeways that look exactly like ours, and you see people that look exactly like us stopping tanks, that that brings it home in a way that I don't think anybody intended.
Right. And that's just it is like, I have to give my kudos to the Russian people who've gone out to protest and say, stop this,
Yeah.
stop the war, no war, because, they don't live in a society like ours where, I get to, I could go out and, stand out in front of my local capital and demand that there's no war, say, fuck the governor, fuck the president, things like that.
Right.
And nothing's going to happen. I mean, there might be some supporters on the other side who try to rouse some shit, but the government's not going to do anything. I'm not going to jail for
Mm-mm.
saying fuck the president or fuck the government. I'm not going to jail for protesting the war. It's one of those things where, you know, I really do wish more societies had that right. And, watching people who are, quite literally just standing there holding up signs get arrested, that really should drive it home for a lot of people why you don't want to limit protests, at least here in this country.
Well, this the same freedom that gives Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson their voices are the same ones that give us our counterpoint abilities.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's a freedom that we definitely do have that communists definitely don't. And I keep thinking of Tucker Carlson, the one communist of record, one of two communists on record right now, him and Trump, that he would not have the ability to question his country if we had communist rule. And I think about Donald Trump saying, doesn't that look wonderful? Those peacekeepers, we need that on our border. And I keep thinking that's the America Donald Trump wants for New York and Chicago and LA and
Hmm.
Seattle. That's what he wants. That's Donald Trump's fever dream, is a police state like that. And him coming out and being so blatant on it is forcing Republicans to go the other way. Thank God.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been some Republicans here that I had their responses have somewhat surprised me.
Me
Uh,
too.
Tommy Tuberville, for example, I wasn't expecting
Wow.
that one. That
I
was one of
Mitt
that
Romney
was.
going on CNN and saying cozying up to Putin is close to treasonous.
Hmm.
Fuck yeah. And that, yes, Donald Trump stopping javelins to Ukraine is affecting them now. And we're seeing what his effects are having. I
On the
like
same
that
sign, though,
Republicans are doing that.
absolutely, and at the same time too, we've watched as finally some of our friends have managed to get arms and ammunition to Ukraine,
Yeah.
and so for the Ukrainian people, that's paying off. And um, all of this could have been avoided. That's the tough part in this, is that, yeah, Ukraine wanted to join NATO, but NATO wasn't exactly interested in having Ukraine. That was the
Well,
thing.
27 members were Hungary, and I can't remember the other countries that were opposed to it at the time, but it's a unanimous thing. 30 countries have to agree to it, and so that's
Yep.
what they were waiting for. Just like, when we wanted to pass equal rights amendment, 37 states had to agree to it.
Hmm.
It's You need a consensus in a community to do these things, and that's the problem with what's going on with NATO. It's a slower process, like the UN. It's full of roadblocks that people are using to get their way. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And and that's where this all gets really interesting, because all of this could have been avoided. It really could have. You know, without a NATO treaty, there weren't going to be any American troops in Ukraine.
Right.
And even if there were a NATO treaty, the American government hasn't exactly been thrilled about sending more troops. In fact, we had pulled a lot of our troops, saying, look, you guys need to learn how to defend yourselves. I mean, you guys
Right.
have the capabilities, but you know we can't be the one that's supplying forces everywhere. And right around that time, we're pulling troops back home, we're
Mhm.
pulling them away. Putin goes and does this, and now we're forced to send a lot of those troops back into all these other countries that we had just pulled them out of.
Yeah. I don't want to try and guess what Putin was thinking, but I think he thought his 20-year plan was about to die because Donald Trump wasn't going to get reelected and he wasn't going to be able to do it covertly. And so he just had to do
Hmm.
this overtly. Why he had to do it is an interesting thing to me, because when you think
Hmm.
about when you think about Putin, he's not coming from a position of strength. What he's coming from is like a devastated economy that bases 45 to 55% of it on a pipeline. Like he has somebody once said that Russia is a gas station posing as a country. And the truth is so, and this is important, there's monarchs and then there's autocrats, kleptocrats. Kleptocrat is an autocrat that siphons money out of a country into his own financial gains. And so
Hmm.
Russia could prosper if there wasn't so much money being siphoned out of the country. If he put it back into the country, but he doesn't invest in infrastructure, he pulls all the profits out for a yacht. And so they don't have they can't find oil. They need Shell to come in. They need Exxon to come in and find their oil from them. They can't dig it. They can't process it properly. They're using old stuff to do it because they don't invest in this stuff. And so the
Hmm.
Russian people, the communist idea is that everybody works for the glory of the government. And if the communist government could be prospering right now, but he's stolen all of those profits. And so now what he's left with is nothing, no resources. And I kind of think he wants to invade Ukraine for the resources, for the
Hmm.
wheat, for that stuff, so he can prop up his economy in a different direction and diversify instead of investing that money he's taking into diversification.
Yep. No, and then and that's definitely an absolutely I would say a true statement in that regard. Because when you look at, it's not even just the farming economy, it's also the fact that Ukraine has a ton of minerals. They have a ton of fissionable materials.
Right.
Ukraine has a huge uranium source, and Ukraine has a huge titanium source. That's something that's very important. So the reality is that, when it comes to, all the resources that Ukraine has, Russia had, basically Ukraine's sources were developed, to the point of being easily accessible. Russia
Hmm.
refuses to do that with their own stuff. So,
And they have the landmass to do it. That's my
oh,
point. They
absolutely.
could easily plant wheat fields if Putin just invested in tractors, but he'd rather have his lap pools on his yacht. And that's the point we need to drive home. Why did America go into Afghanistan? Minerals, right? Like, to a big point, it was the resources. It wasn't to
Hmm.
extend democracy to a place. It was because it was profitable. We were making more than we were spending there. But then when that became obvious that it was for minerals and not human rights, we got out.
Right. And that's the thing is like, our access to minerals there became questionable. And I mean, let's be real honest about that. And at the same time too, we started to recognize the signs that, the only reason that we were keeping that access available was because we were keeping troops in the country. And if we were going to ever get ourselves out of the country, we either had to A, have a government there that, could fight like the Ukrainians are, or B, we just had to give up and say, look, this is untenable. And that's pretty much what happened. We were looking at, Obama was looking at pulling out of Afghanistan 10 years ago,
Oh
and
yeah.
didn't do it. And Trump said he was going to do it, and it didn't, the motion started, but it didn't come to fruition until after he was out of office.
Right. He did it at the end of his term to cause chaos for Biden. And bravo. I mean, congratulations to Biden for handling this the way he has.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, everybody I know that talked to said no matter what, Afghanistan was going to be a shit show. I mean, Ukraine's also
Yeah.
kind of a shit show right now, but I would say that, when you look at how Ukraine has handled themselves up against an advancing force, that, it's a much different story, because Ukraine's fighting for their own homeland, and they're fighting to keep away from, being under Russian rule again.
Right.
It's been pretty amazing to see the amount of fight that they have in them, and
Yeah.
it's something that we have talked about, multiple times, especially, me being a gun owner and everything like that. You know, with the Ukrainian government handing out weapons to whoever wants to stay and fight,
Mm-hmm.
for our American audience, and I would, for all other audiences around the world, um, the reason we have the Second Amendment is basically this scenario that's happening in Ukraine right now.
Right.
This is the exact scenario. Why Americans are allowed to keep and bear arms. Now,
To form a
realistically,
militia. It isn't to have some horn dog shooting contest, shooting people everywhere on the streets or mass
exactly,
shootings and killings in schools. That's not what the Second Amendment was for. It was to protect each other, not to kill each other.
exactly. And that is a realization that a lot of people I've seen are finally starting to understand it. It's now, I mean, when you look at the American position, where we're at, is Canada going to do anything to us? No. Is Mexico going to do anything to us? No. Like realistically, the only country out there that has the ability to, let's say, do something like what's happening in Ukraine would be China. And China's
Mhm.
not going to do that because that'll completely fuck up their economy. They have no desire to do that.
And what that's a great point because China is actually what Russia could be, right?
Hmm.
Because she isn't siphoning out the profits, he's investing it and he's actually borrowing against his potential to create a better society. I mean, I do not like his humanitarian views, right? But
Right.
you have to say, as far as a leader leading a country, taking out 30% of his atrocities, taking out that and looking at him as a ruler investing in his country, that's what communism's supposed to be. And
Hmm.
I see Xi saying, "Go ahead and invade Ukraine because I really like the resources I have just off to the west." I kind of want a little of Russia for myself, and if I can just work my way in there, you're going to lose a lot of land because Putin's going to fall, and she's going to capitalize on that.
Oh, I guarantee you that, most likely, somebody will try and capitalize on Russia falling.
Yeah,
And the thing is that it's not going to be the US. That's the real honest truth, because
right.
we don't have any desire to try and go in there and make that happen. We did that whole issue of, having a system of allies go in and fight a war, and then
Right,
have to divide up a country in order to, quote unquote, administer the peacekeeping of that country. And that
right.
was a shit show. And there's absolutely zero appetite to do that.
And people
So
will fight that. The people
no,
will fight that. I mean, that's what we
yeah,
did in South America, right? Little puppet regimes all over the place. It doesn't work. The people don't like it.
right. And that's one of the things is that, when you look at how the West handled situations like Japan and Germany after, the Second World War,
Mm-hmm.
we had these fights of, well, what system of government's going to be the best? And the answer was legitimately that, we dumped a bunch of money into, places like South Korea. We dumped a bunch of money into places like Japan and Germany for them to become, the systems that they are. But
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmingly, what ended up happening was we allowed them to adopt their own dreams as well.
That's right.
And Japan and Germany are, I would not say, are anything close to a puppet of America in any way, shape, or form. In fact, a lot of the times the things that we want to do, they flat out tell us no.
Right. And
and
then
we're like, all right, well, okay.
and democracy, and there we've had a lot of failures with that too, right? We've
Oh yeah.
invested in countries and that it's just totally tanked. But there's democracy springing up around here in the Dominican Republic and other places like
Yeah.
around our hemisphere, and democracy is still thriving. And I think what I think about Ukraine is like it's this
Mm.
stage. It's like it's where communism, the best of communism meets the best of democracy for a head-to-head contest on who's better, right? And
Hmm.
that was the stage. And I think Putin just kind of flipped the chessboard and went, I don't want to play anymore. you know?
Well, I mean, he did flat out put his nuclear arsenal on alert because
Yeah,
he's the illegitimate Western sanctions. It's like, the thing is that if you got the fuck out of Ukraine, we would probably be willing to talk about reversing those sanctions.
right,
And that's the reality is that you can call them illegitimate all you want, but you know, we're not the ones with fucking troops, bombing schools and fucking, civilian living blocks in another
right.
country. Well, right now, I should say.
Like he didn't even give them a chance to evacuate women and children, you know? He was just like, no, we're not going to invade. No, no,
No, what do you
no.
no, the heinous part is having a meeting with the UN saying that the Russian government isn't going to invade Ukraine while
Right.
they are literally invading Ukraine. Like that right there is probably the most heinous thing that I've seen. And it's absolutely aberrant. It's
Right.
there is no excuses, there's no reasons, and unfortunately I think that you're going to see the Russian government lose a lot of its pull on the international stage because of it.
Right.
And rightfully so. I mean, you've got China who is, you know not helping the Russians out. I mean, they're
Yeah.
still they're still throwing their blame at us for a number of things, but they're also telling Russia that they have to respect Ukraine's sovereignty. and
Right.
and they are not helping them, avoid sanctions. They've hindered their ability to borrow based on commodities. They've
Hmm.
hindered their ability to transfer money. So I mean, China has done its own thing to, basically keep the Russians in check. And it's one part, it's one part, trying to appease. I wouldn't say appease the US and the Western side of the thing of the country, because you know they have a lot of they do have a lot of market in other countries, in Western countries, and
Yeah.
they don't want to lose that market. But at the same time, too, I can also see where for China, it's a power play to show the Russians, look, you don't have the pull you once had, so you need to stop acting like you do.
Right. You have an economy the size of Texas on a good day.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I imagine that when Putin went to the Olympics, he told Xi this was going to happen. And for some reason, I see Xi just saying, no, like, we're not supporting this. But I see two steps away from Russia saying, we have no choice but then to deal with only China, and China saying, why would we pay you for the resources that are on land that we can take from you? I really see that happening in 2 or 3 steps. In 10 years, China could just take half of, because Russia, they can't protect that, their east side. You know what I mean? Is it their
Yeah,
east side? Yeah, their east side.
yeah, their eastern side.
So I
Well, and
just
that's
see China taking it. Like, those are ours. It was Chinese land originally. So I don't see why they wouldn't just say, hey, you want to you want to form your Soviet Union. We want our empire back too, you know?
and that's I think the dangerous part about this is that
Hmm.
you know when it comes down to it, it's like you have a bunch of people who ain't exactly acting like friends, they ain't exactly acting like enemies, and they're just a bunch of sharks waiting until they can smell blood in the water.
Right.
And that's exactly what's going to happen, unfortunately. This is going to be tough for I would say a lot of Western democracies, in that you're going to watch Ukraine either win this fight and take out enough troops that Moscow somehow decides this is not tenable,
Hmm.
or what's going to happen is you're going to see something like somebody's going to get trigger happy with something they shouldn't, and that's going to leave the United States no choice but to get involved, and that you don't want to do.
Right. I mean, Russia took hold of Chernobyl.
Yep.
Why would they fight so hard to take over Chernobyl? That's scary to me. Moving nukes into Belarus and putting your nuclear armory on high demand. I wanted to start this episode with the phrase nuclear blackmail, you
Hmm.
know, because that
And
is a
that's
scary ass thought. That's when I started taking this like him seriously. Like, I see the war in Ukraine as devastating, but when he said stay out of it or I'll nuke you, that to me a line that we all had to take
well,
serious.
to me, it was a line we had to take serious, but at that point, I still thought he had his faculties about him enough to not fucking do that. But
Right.
but today, now that he has put Russia's nuclear forces on high alert,
Mm-hmm.
like that is really disconcerting, because even though the United States has some of the most advanced nuclear weapons in the world, like, the idea of us using them is like the furthest thing from our brains. But this move by Russia, I guarantee you, is going to leave us no choice but to advance to DEFCON 2, which basically means we're teetering on a precipice. And
Right.
for those who don't know, DEFCON 1, so we have 5 through 1, 5 being the lowest, 1 being the highest. 1 meaning nukes are either detonating or they're on the way. And so DEFCON 2 basically means, like, even for us now, we have to put our nuclear systems on alert. And I'm not saying that we've done that yet. I don't know if we have or not. Um, Easily could look it up, though, because they do put that information out
Oh
there.
yeah. They have the
But
doomsday clock, right? 2 minutes to
well, the
midnight.
doomsday clock is done by another organization. Um, I'll look up DEFCON status right now and see if we
Yeah.
have. Um,
But so a nuclear, we and Russia have a nuclear triad, which means we have land, sea, and air nuclear capabilities. And Russia and Trump eliminated the intermediate range nuclear treaty that we had with them. And so Russia has been able to design intermediate range missiles. They tried doing a hypersonic missile that just circled the Earth with a nuclear warhead on it, and that crashed into the ocean. So we do know that they were designing this stuff. So it's real possible that a Russian submarine could be off the coast of Alaska right now, or off the coast of Maine or Florida or
Oh,
Seattle, you
I
know?
mean, it's always possible, and that's the thing about it is that you know, we never know exactly, what could happen, and it's really hard to say. The United States definitely does not want anything to do with any sort of nuclear, exposure.
Right.
It's not what we want, and it's very disconcerting that we even have to think about it.
And what's weird
So,
is now we all know what Donald Trump looked like from the other perspective. Like not here, somewhere else, right? Because
right.
Putin is doing this sweaty, jerky sort of lying. He knows he's lying. He knows that we're telling everybody exactly how he's lying. He doesn't seem to notice, like, I don't think he understands that the world is in this 21st century form of media where everybody sees everything all the time, and he thinks he's pulling the wool over our eyes because he has a bunch of people around him saying, yeah, you're being so sly, like Mike Pompeo saying he's very shrewd. I don't know how shrewd he's being right now. Like, I almost feel like he has a form of rabies. You know what I mean? Like it's early onset rabies was my initial thought.
Yeah. It's yeah, I'll have to see if I can find that another way here later. But
Yeah, yeah.
the reality is that, you know, we we were at DEF CON 3. I know that much. Whether or not we've moved up to DEF CON 2 after that, like to give you an idea, the only time that the United States has moved up to DEF CON 2 was when the Soviet Union put nuclear missiles in Cuba.
Yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
And you think about that, that was a time where, you know, the United States had more advanced nuclear missiles
Mm-hmm.
and were able to deliver strikes to the Soviet Union, but the Russians had to be a lot closer in order to do that. And so that was one of those things where, for them, they showed their hand that they couldn't hit us unless they were right off our coast.
Right.
But we could hit them from, essentially across the world. Now, both sides could do that. That's not hard for either side to do. And this should all worry anybody. Like,
Yeah.
I am somebody who firmly believes that nuclear weapons were the biggest mistake of humanity. Um, the idea that, well, if we can't have it, then we're just going to glass half the planet is absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
Like, that's not okay. Like, if
Mm-mm.
your idea of winning a fight is to render the planet uninhabitable, then you really need to reevaluate your position as a human being, because
Yeah.
like we can disagree, we can fight conventional wars, but at the end of the day, you still have to respect humanity, and humanity that is not going to be involved in a nuclear showdown.
Right.
And those are the people that we need to be thinking about, and we need to respect, because they are going to experience the fallout of all out nuclear war, and that's not okay.
And since Reagan, there's been an attempt to get to nuclear zero. And it wasn't until
Yeah.
then nothing stopped until Putin got into power. And then it was accelerated when Trump started another nuclear Cold War by modernizing our nukes, which caused Russia to modernize their nukes, which started this whole process to where we are right now, where people, you
Hmm.
know, in the 1950s, when they came up with this nuclear stuff, we played with things like nuclear hand grenades and
Hmm.
bazookas, and we realized that isn't safe. So we
Yeah.
got rid of that. We went to Russia and we went no, right? And Russia was like sane enough to be like, no, no, we don't
Right.
want to make nuclear hand grenades, you know?
Exactly. Like, we had nuclear torpedoes,
Yeah.
nuclear hand grenades, nuclear like
Hmm.
I remember they were even experimenting with nuclear bullets, like for
Right.
conventional rifles. So the idea was like, okay, yeah, I may not be able to kill you, but I can give you radiation sickness. And it's like, okay, Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
you
And
know,
so there was sanity to this. And I think there should be a specific force for when somebody says, I'm going to nuke you, to where we go and arrest whoever it is on the planet at the time. You know what I mean? That's
right.
dangerous as fuck. That should never be a threat that comes out of anybody's mouth unless they want to be North Korean, you know?
Well, and I have to give kudos to Mikhail Gorbachev for coming out, and saying, after his, rule of the Soviet Union, saying that, nuclear weapons are the biggest threat to the planet and nobody should have them. Like,
Right.
I couldn't agree more in that regard. I don't believe anybody should have nuclear weapons, and I mean it's a fever dream because you have a
Yeah.
number of countries who will not give them up, and I really wish that they would all consider it,
Yeah.
because that's a dangerous game to play, and it's only going to take one madman who has enough of a sycophant following
Mm-hmm.
that they'll be like, yeah, fuck it, we're going to hit that button.
Yeah.
Luckily, in the past, it's, for Americans and the Soviets, there were people behind the scenes that were like, no, 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 we don't want to do this, this is a terrible
Right.
decision. And we've had that back channel communication to stop that from happening. And
Mm-hmm.
my hope is that we have more of that. We need more of that. We need more people that are willing to step up and say, fucking no, calm the fuck down, this isn't okay.
Right. That's what I'm wondering. Is there anybody behind the scenes in Russia that would stop him?
I
I would
guarantee
imagine
you,
there has to be
I
somebody that would
guarantee you
stop
there
him.
there probably is. And my hope is that this person has the bravery to walk this back off of a ledge.
Yeah.
And I say that as somebody who, I truly want peace for the Ukrainian people. I truly want peace for the Russian people. And I want peace for everybody. I want people to just be able to live their lives and not have to worry about who the fuck's going to invade their country and who the fuck's going to
Right.
kill them and or nuke them. There is no reason to let it progress that far.
The world wasn't made for 10 assholes. You know what I mean?
Right.
Vladimir Putin doesn't get to scare the entire planet. That's not fair. Like, Viktor Orban doesn't have the permission to just fuck with the entire planet. Like Kim in North Korea. These guys
Mhm.
don't have the right to just say it's so, you know? Like,
Right.
I believe that people have the, I don't care, North Korea, be North Korea, but open your border and let people out if they want to be out. Let people in if they want to be in, and then go with that. If you believe North Korea's government is the best, do it. If you believe communism is the best, go to Russia. But, and if you believe it here, like if you're Tucker Carlson and you want to, expose communism to the light of day, go ahead and do that. We'll make up our decision. In America, you can say what you want. I honestly think that Fox News has Tucker on because they're trying to break into the Russian market, kind of like Facebook and Apple and Google
Hmm.
are trying to do. And I think Fox just puts a communist on 1 hour a day so that he gets on their TV and then they can start running the state-owned TV. That's what I feel about Fox. And that's gross to me, but let them do it. I mean,
Well, I mean, you've already had people in the Russian government flat out say that, they're citing stuff from Tucker Carlson
yeah, and
and
Pompeo.
trying to say that, what Tucker Carlson is saying is the way that the vast majority of Americans feel. And I'm
Right.
gonna tell you right now that even amongst, a lot of my friends and family who are, lean towards the right, and some of them very heavily so, don't believe
Mhm.
that, you know.
Right.
So that's the thing, is like, it's really tough because,
Getting
it's
any American to be a communist is an impossible thing, especially with the like America lovers that they gathered. Like, I get Trump tricked them to make America better, but those people aren't going to jump to communism as the answer to it.
oh hell
Never,
no. Oh
never.
hell no. They will never do that. And that's the, and that's the irony of it, is you have Putin, who's literally saying that he's trying to denazify Ukraine,
I'm
who's
glad you brought that up.
who's led by a fucking Jew.
Right, from Russia. He's a
Wait,
TV personality from Russia that went to Ukraine.
I
Like,
think he's Ukrainian, but I mean he
right,
got famous in Russia. Yeah.
right, right. Well, I think he was born in Russia, but he went to Ukraine. I'm not quite sure.
Let me
There's a
look
lot of
that
stuff,
up.
but that's the amazing thing is like they know he's not a Nazi. They've known him. It's like saying Bob Saget was like a racist. We know Bob Saget. He's been in our lives forever. So, and Vladimir Zelensky is like the closest thing to a superhero we have on the planet right now, you know? And he wants to meet. I don't, all right, I'll wait.
Nope, he was Zelensky was born in let's see here. I am going to butcher this. Kryvyi Rih, Ukrainian SSR. So
Okay,
he was born in Ukraine, in
okay.
Ukrainian in territory
But when it was controlled by Russia,
when it was part of the Soviet Union.
that's
So,
still
but
cool. I
that's
mean,
a lot of that's a
yeah.
lot. That's going to be a lot of it though. So like he's very much he's Ukrainian through and through.
Well, that's the point. It's kind of like America and Texas, Russia and Ukraine. Like it's a form of Russia. Like Russians are living in Ukraine, right? Russian speaking former Russians are living and working in Ukraine. Ukrainians live in Russia. It's right there to where the border is so porous to where
Mm.
anybody can go. And that's a real weird thing. I heard like a Russian soldier actually said, I didn't know I was coming to kill Ukrainians. These are my brothers, you know?
Yep. And that's I think the reality is that you have a lot of the Slav countries view themselves as brothers through and through.
Right,
I mean, you look at, Moscow. Moscow comes from the Kievan Rus,
right,
because you had, the Kievan Rus were, a tribe that eventually would settle within, the northern regions and, would found what would be modern Russia.
right. Kiev was Russia's um what is that, capital, right? For a long
Uh,
time?
no, no,
No, when it was an empire, I thought it was
no. That was always St. Petersburg.
okay.
But I mean, by going back, I mean a lot. I want to say even like into like the 800 or 900s. A lot of what would become Russia, the people there were based out of Ukraine and Kiev. So a lot of the Slavic countries are, well, there's a lot of them that owe some lineage to keep, their foundations with
Right.
Kiev, and that's really what it boils down to. Is it's like they are very much related. They are very much brothers. And I want to say, between, like, if I remember correctly, something like between Belarusian and Russian and Ukraine, like there's a, like, it's kind of like the Scandinavian languages. They're mutually intelligible, um,
Right.
but there are some significant differences between them. And so, like, I want to say, Belarusian and Russian, and there's like a 90% similarity, and Ukrainian and Russian there's like 84% similarity or something like that. So it's like mutually intelligible, like they can understand each other. But, like,
Right.
given that they were part of the USSR for a long time, all those countries, they all spoke Russian because of their Russian language programs.
Okay.
Um, and that, I think, has a lot more to do with Brezhnev than anything, because I mean, Stalin wanted people to, Stalin was Georgian, and so that was one of those things where it's like, okay, whatever. Nikita Khrushchev, he wanted greater literacy, and he made huge steps towards doing that. But he wanted people to be fluent in their languages and Russian.
Mhm.
So Russian was very much on the table for a lot of them. But then during the Brezhnev era, if I remember correctly, the language program became, that Russian was, your primary language, and all other languages were treated as a foreign language. So even if you were Ukrainian, you had to learn Russian primary, and Ukrainian was taught like once a week as a foreign language, even though you're literally Ukrainian.
Right.
And so that's something that's really interesting, because of how those countries were integrated, and how they
Yeah.
learned to be able to work with each other despite having, a number of different ethnicities.
Right. I just think Ukraine was a great neutral zone for that. It was a great melding pot for ideas that way. I mean, if you could form a hybrid of communism and democracy and socialism and capitalism all in one place, that's a breeding ground, like Hong Kong, like Taiwan. These are places, the Philippines, that, it's on the table. Which one do you want? It's right there, like it is in America right now, like you don't see the choice in Canada being communism or what we have. It's just not a debate there. In England, it was during Brexit a point of debate. And countries get to make their choices and the people get to make their choices. If 51% of Ukraine wants Russia, then I say you push for it, but you can't force it.
And that's, and we've had that conversation before. And I want to say, um, the UN ambassador to Kenya actually made this point where
Yeah.
he's like, empires drew lines on maps, and ethnically we have brothers across borders, and there is a great desire to be able to have, to
Mm.
reunite with your brothers and be a part of that society that is, you. But you cannot force that, and this is one of those things where I really do think that, on the world stage we need to open up a greater ability for countries to realign their borders the way that they want to, and reach agreements, and not have these, straight up, wars and fallouts and all this other stuff, and that, these countries should be able to diplomatically redesign their borders. Taking pieces of land by force is very much, as he said, it's very much a piece of the colonial and empire era that needs to go away. We're
Right.
we're far more advanced and more civilized than we were in those days. There is no reason why we can't sit down, discuss, and actually agree without guns pointed at people, and let them
Yeah.
figure out who they want to be a part of. And that's the tough part, is that, this idea of territorial integrity and the desire to be a part of, who you want to be a part of is something that's always going to play at odds with each other.
Agreed.
But but I think that's where in America we don't exactly have that issue, because in America it's, I would say, heavily based on ideals, and I've
Right.
even said to some extent, that states should be able to realign and redraw their maps based on shared political ideas. Let's be real honest. Eastern Washington and Western Washington, two very different political ideal systems.
Oh, sure.
Very, very different. And I do sympathize with people in Eastern Washington who are like, why the fuck are we paying for things that we don't ever get to use? Why are we the ones that are, beholden to, Seattle? I get it. I
Right.
really do. And I think Seattle and Portland have more in common with each other than Seattle and Spokane.
Sure.
And I think that's the same case in Oregon as well, with Western Oregon and Eastern Oregon.
Mhm. Yeah,
You
it's
know,
the same in Texas, California, Florida. We're all divided
Northern
that way.
California versus,
Hmm.
versus the South,
Oh,
the
yeah.
southern part of California.
Northern
Very
Texas is super liberal, dude. Austin, super liberal, but you go just 100 miles towards Dallas or Houston, super conservative,
right. You know, and I think that's one of those things where when we set up all of these lines on the map, we did so in a way that, at the time it made sense ish.
Mm,
And maybe that's one of the greater discussions that needs to be held, is, how do we as not just a country but as a world sit down and have discussions, very important discussions about, the right to affiliate with who you want. And I think this is where people who advocate for open borders, might be well ahead of that step. It's like,
mhm.
I can understand where and why they want to do that, but at the same time I can also understand that, from a from a current political stance, open borders don't make sense. Now, if this is a huge if we were to allow ourselves the freedom of association and not have the government get involved in everything,
Sure.
you know, being the libertarian that I am,
Mhm.
I really do think that open borders could work.
I do too.
Because the answer there is that it's like, look, you know, you come over, as long as you are doing the things that are productive, you can stay here.
Yep.
you know Make it easy to get you a green card to work. We got, here in the country, we got plenty of jobs that need to be filled.
Yeah,
And
and Mexico has plenty of room to grow, you know? It's the
absolutely.
border that holds all of that up and that we spend billions of dollars on a year,
Hmm.
that we just don't have to. If we spent that, I'm sorry, my border rant.
I
If we
know your
spent
border
that
rant.
money, if we spent that money on infrastructure at the border, there wouldn't be a border. There'd be this sort of neutral zone where people phase in and out. I know that I know a lot of Mexicans that live in Mexico City would move to a border city if they could just walk 2 blocks into America and work at a factory and then go back and live in Mexico and have a summer home with their parents
and
further
and
in.
and the reality is that, if Americans would learn to be comfortable with the idea that people who work here pay taxes here,
Yeah,
and so, they don't, they're citizens of another country, they don't get the benefits of being a citizen of our country.
right. But
they
they're
get the
still paying
benefits of
taxes.
they get the benefits of having a job here, but they have to pay our taxes. That's
Yep,
the reality.
right.
And we need that. We really do need that. And especially when you look at the shape of world connections as it is right now, if you want America to be a decent manufacturing hub,
Yeah,
you're going to have to look at, whether or not you can have workers from Mexico or from Canada be able to come in across the border easily, have their green card to work here, but be able to go back home and get back into the country. and
agreed.
and that's the reality, is that I think that there is a very viable way to do this. I think there's a very viable way to turn areas of our country into manufacturing hubs,
Mm-hmm.
where, people will live on border towns,
Yep.
come across the border to come to work, pay
And go
taxes in this
home.
country based on their wages, and then they'll go back to their country
Yeah. The
at the end
same
of the
here,
day.
by the way. Poor people will migrate to border towns to work at places in Mexico that are just being built. It's I don't know.
And
That's
and,
how
and
that's the
here's
way
the
I see it.
reality. And here's the reality is that you'll have shopping centers that spring up inside on our side of the border. They're going to buy
Mm-hmm.
stuff to take back home. They're
Right.
going to be spending the money that they make by and large here, with a good significant chunk of it coming back, you know
Yeah.
uh, going back to their place, but they're going to also be buying products from our country. So the money that they're spending, yeah, sure, some of it is definitely going to go home to their local economy, but a vast majority of it's going to end up being spent on ours.
Or it's going to go into one of the government's federal funds that protects both countries. Like, you know what
Mhm.
I mean, from foreign invaders. It just because somebody was saying Mexican, that's not a nationality, it's a country. You have to take people back to where the providence that they grew up in, the area, the land that they grew up on. And that's not necessarily
Mhm.
divided by a Mexican American border. Some of them are from California, but their families are from places in Mexico, provinces, areas. So, yeah, just getting
Mhm.
past that and letting people, a person doesn't see a border, right? They just go to work. If they're on
Mhm.
the border of Texas and Mexico, they're just coming here for work, like as a nurse or a factory worker. They don't see the border. Groups of people. It's us that we're like, oh no, and the government doesn't care. They're just like, we want our revenue. Like we want the revenue on our side. So a
Mhm.
border is only economic. It isn't personal. It isn't political. It's something to waste money on, And
and
you can
and
see that in Ukraine and Russia, by the way, because their border was so porous, the people were just people.
and that's just it, is that, I guarantee you that, in Russia there are places where they need Ukrainian workers, and in
Yeah.
Ukraine vice versa, they need Russian workers. And the reality is that what this is going to end up doing is causing a lot of animosity between two countries that really were brothers in
Oh yeah.
so many aspects. And it's, you know it's really unfortunate And I want to say this, there were a couple of countries, Finland and Sweden, that they were on the fence about NATO. They were like,
Right.
yeah, I could see where it'd be important, I could see where it's not. Based on what Russia has done, they have done a better job of selling NATO than NATO could sell NATO. Like
Yeah.
NATO was more like a drinking club for the longest time.
Right. That
It was
they
like,
almost had it as fractured as it could be. It was almost disbanded. It was almost unnecessary.
right. And unfortunately, the actions of Putin and the Russian government have shown that apparently it's still a necessity. And
Hmm.
that's unfortunate because, even in the US, yeah, we had NATO, but we were still pushing for Europe to be able to defend itself, like
Yeah.
not have us get involved. Europe is advanced enough that they can fight their own battles.
Well, you know what I know about Germany. They're really hesitant to militarize for good reason, right? And we
Hmm.
can see why. And but they've just agreed to start advancing their military technologies and defense. So
Yep.
once I think we have always been trying to train Germany to take that stage in Europe, and Andrea Merkel did that really well. But now
Yeah, Angela
they
Merkel did that, and
yeah, but everybody sees the need to defend themselves against Russia now, especially the countries not in NATO, like bordering Russia. Yeah, I never even thought about Sweden and Finland being affected by Russia the way they are,
well,
majorly,
Finland is now pushing. There's been a civilian petition to join NATO now because of
Yeah.
this. Finland didn't necessarily want this. They just wanted to be able to do their own thing, and I
Hmm.
respect that. Sweden has wanted to maintain neutrality,
Yeah.
and I can understand why countries like Finland and Sweden wanted to maintain neutrality.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
there's something viable and important about saying, no, 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 you guys deal with your own shit. We're here doing our own thing.
Right. But we have a border and they border closer to urban areas in Moscow, don't they? I mean, they're closer to
In
Moscow than
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg. So they also have a porous border where people go in and out. And Russia did try taking over Finland, and Finland did not have any of that, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, Finland did end up having to give up some of their land during the Second World War,
Mm.
but um, because Finland used to expand further to the east, but
Ah,
but the now it's but now you're looking at an issue where Finland's like, shit, what are we going to do about this? Like, we
right.
didn't
There's a
want to be
big
involved,
bully. We got to join a gang to get away from the big bully.
and
I'm
that's just
gonna
it.
I'm gonna ask you just to get if you have a message for Ukraine, and then because we're towards the end, and I want to make sure we get some information to Russians to let
Mhm.
them know what's going on, and then a little support of Ukraine. And I'm gonna let you do that, and then come back and have mine, and then we'll move into the second hour.
Yeah. Um, so my message for the Ukrainian people listening is that I really hope very, very soon that you will be able to return to peace. You'll be able to put the pieces of your lives back together as much as you can. And I am absolutely amazed and proud of how you have defended your homeland. There is, this is something that, as an American, we kind of grow up with this idea that, we're always going to be prepared to defend our home, but seeing how you have kept the fight to your homeland as much as possible is absolutely amazing. And my hope for you all is that you have your national heroes. Zelensky has proven himself to be an incredible leader. Um, and I do firmly hope that his words still maintain the relevance that they did when he was inaugurated in 2019. That you don't put pictures up of Zelensky, put pictures up of your family and make your decisions based on that. And what I hope for you as a people is that when you rebuild, you will rebuild back stronger, better, with a greater national unity, knowing that you fought for each other, despite what differences you may have had before in the political realm. You fought as Ukrainians, not as whatever party you have chosen to represent your worldview on. And that is my hope, is that when your world returns to as normal as it can be, that you remember, as Ukrainians, you are all brothers first, and you don't let politics divide you.
We'll be there. I mean, the world will be there to help you rebuild. It's uh, so to Russia, what I want to say to Russians is what I pretty much said all hour. Vladimir Putin is the reason that your country is as decrepit as it is, because he's been siphoning out the resources that should go to the progress that you've suffered for. Like, you don't live the richest lives. You live in mediocrity to serve the glory of your government. And that glory isn't being given back to you in the form of prosperity. He has a trillion-dollar house, billion-dollar house. He has a $1.5 trillion in assets hidden around the world. That's yours. That's your glory. That's not Vladimir Putin's glory. So communism could work. It could work. You're in a great country. You have an honorable country. You have one man that is totally an issue. And it's not because of his stand on communism. He can defend that to his dying day. He's stealing from you. And that's the issue. That's why you're failing. And that's why he's invading another country. And to Ukraine, I want to say Vladimir Zelensky is on the map as one of my heroes now. If he was to die in some way, the world would scream in horror and pain, and I can't imagine what would happen. So I don't think it's a wise move to kill him. You'll make him an idol, just like we worry about terrorists. So Vladimir Putin has to worry about what he does to this man, because he's basically a saint. He's a superhero. We don't have Iron Man right now. We have Vladimir Zelensky. And Ukrainians, as people, I think you showed America, the privileged, entitled portion of America that wanted to play insurrection, what insurrection really looks like. And you are showing us an example of heroism that we don't have in this country. We haven't had since 9/11, and I think this is bringing America together in a way that I don't think Vladimir Putin ever intended. So thank you for your example. That guy stopping a tank. I got to tell you, Jeffrey, it sounds stupid. Doing the right thing at the right time sometimes means kneeling in front of a tank. And as much as I don't have the right to say it, I feel like it would be something I would do. I would rather die because of the oppression than have to live under it. And I think I would go in front of a tank. Of
I
course,
think
if
I
I was
would
in a
too.
if I was in a car, half of my car would have gotten crushed. What the fuck?
Right. And and my message to the Russian people, is that you you are a very strong and proud people, and you
Mhm.
have every reason to be strong and proud of yourselves. I know that right now it might feel like the world is just absolutely shitting on you, but I need you to understand, it's your government, not you, the regular everyday people.
Right.
Most, all of us regular everyday people understand that war is an atrocity, and there is no place for it in modern society, period, end of story. There's always the need to be prepared to defend yourselves, but there is very rarely ever an occasion where you need to be on the offensive. And I believe that there are a lot of you out there that recognize that, if not half, maybe more. And my hope is that when this all finishes and everybody's borders are respected, that you too get to rebuild your government in a way that is more beneficial to the people of Russia, not the people who have the money in Russia. I do believe that you have every reason to keep pursuing so many different things that you've been pursuing, and that you can be a much greater nation, but that you have been taken advantage of by your politicians, and that's unfortunate. And I sympathize with you on that. Be strong, and just remember that, you know, there are other ways that you can make your government a government of the Russian people, and have them be the ones that are not dictating wars in foreign lands. And I
Yeah.
hope that you get to see that piece one day soon.
Yeah. I hope they get to see the evidence that proves that nobody pushed Russia into this war. You know what I mean? So thank you for listening to Public Access America. We will be right back right after this song. And we are back. And that's what I think is so cool is that, like, communism, imagine any portion of Russia having a 1.5 billion trillion dollars invested in it. How
Mhm.
modern that area of Russia would be. But instead, Vladimir Putin has a yacht. He has a house, you know. And when you see these things in real life, you see the villas, you see the Trump Tower apartments, you realize that they're just sucking money out of Russian people's pockets. And I wanted to say that I kind of feel like Trump is a kleptocrat, not to be a dick. I feel like he just wants to siphon resources that should go to Americans into his own pocket any way he can.
Oh,
And
that's clearly evident based on the way that his
oh, good.
PACs
I, d- I,
run.
d- I try and stay middle of the ground, so I really don't want to attack him on a partisan level. I just feel like
No.
that's what, like, he doesn't want to be communist. He doesn't want to be Vladimir Putin, but he wants to be communist light. Like Bernie Sanders is to socialism. I feel like Donald Trump wants to be a communism.
Well, he wants to be like the upper level of communism. He doesn't want like
Hmm.
any type of actual communism. And it's that, you know, he gets to have his assets, he gets to have his things, and
Right,
everybody contributes into, you know, him being him, but
right.
nobody gets any sort of benefit off of that. Everybody at the bottom gets to starve.
The kleptocrat. Right.
Mhm. And I think that's what ends up like, you know, as we've talked about before, you know, communism on paper has always looked great. In
Hmm.
practice, it looks like kleptocracy.
Right. But I can imagine that's what I was trying to imagine was like Ukraine being this place where Vladimir Putin would have spent 50 billion dollars to make communism look good in Ukraine. Like, why wouldn't he
Mm.
just like go into Ukraine and walk around and hand people flowers and say, "Hey, I'm Vladimir Putin. I love you. Come and join us." You know,
Well,
like,
and and that's that old mentality of, you know, old Soviet doctrine, versus what we did in the West. You know, we went in, we spent a bunch of money modernizing countries,
right.
and when their economies took off on their own, they would work with us.
Yeah.
They were independent. I mean, to a point, I will say.
Hmm.
It wasn't until I want to say like the late 50s, that Germany and Japan were both allowed to like kind of branch off onto their own.
Right.
Um, but even, you know, but even still, like, um, we, you know, the idea of hearts and minds was is that, you know, if you go in and you give people good jobs, if you give them sustainable living conditions, that they're not going to upend their society for that.
Right.
And
And I
really,
think
that's what
isn't it
Putin
it's
could have
kind
done.
it's kind of a libertarian belief that we should stop taking the profits and prosperity from our government and investing them into a further bloated budget, and we should be sharing the prosperity of our good fortunes with the people. Like right now we have an unbalanced poverty line because a lack of resources are coming to the people that help. I know you think
So
homeless people don't invest in the economy. They are a part of the economy. You
I
know what
no
I
no no,
mean?
I wouldn't say that.
Not you personally. People overall have this view of
Right.
poor people not being poor people actually fund our economy with our with our oversized interest rates and student loans and things like that.
So here's what I would say in terms of the libertarian perspective.
Hmm.
Um, when you look at what it means to look at government funding, most of the time, the way that a lot of libertarians look at how money gets sent to the government, we know that there's a ton of waste. We know that, the accounting is questionable at best, and we know that what money is going to be spent is going to be overspent and underdelivered. Whereas, if you were to put that money into the hands of regular American people or business people, they're going to spend that money more efficiently than the government ever could. And that's the truth.
Correctly.
And because governments bloat everything up,
Hmm.
and it's, you have administrators on top of administrators on top of administrators on top of administrators, and each level of administrator takes more and more and more of a cut,
Right.
and until the point it's like, okay, cool, if I wanted to buy this 100-watt solar panel, we say that, if the government buys this really stupid cheap one, they're going
Hmm.
to spend $25 out of 100 on it, and all of that, the rest of that $100 is going to be spent on administrative fees. So you get one solar panel, whereas, you might get, three and let's say, half solar panels out of the same $100,
Mm.
because we don't have the same level of administration if you just put it into the hands of everyday people. So in instead of actually being able to expand your purchasing power, you're limiting it because you have so much government involvement.
Right. Okay. I dig it. I was trying to find. So Rick Scott came up with a list of 11 things that the Republican Party was going to work on. And I was looking for it because one of those things is government reform and debt. And he
Mm-hmm.
feels that many government agencies should either be moved out of Washington or shuttered entirely. So that goes along with your views, right?
Similar. I believe that I don't know that moving an agency out of an area makes any sense. Uh, there are certain realms where it does make sense. So, for example, like the BLM, Bureau of Land Management.
Mm-hmm.
Most Bureau of Land Management lands are in the western part of the United States, like a vast majority of them. So
Right.
when it comes to like the actual like management of those lands, I do believe that that should be done more locally if you're going to keep them in government hands.
Right.
But it's all based out of DC, and so it's more of a political branch than it is an actual management branch. And that's a problem because then you have a lot of political money being spent on politics rather than actual land management. So there's that.
Good point. But there is a cost to travel and administration. But yeah, like
There's
the
there
Department of
was a cost to
Agriculture,
travel. There
like
was
you
a
should.
cost. This is one of those things where we need to start thinking about this in terms of modern day, not
Right.
50 years ago.
Yeah, it used to be a horse and buggy 2 months to get to Washington from, your
or a
state.
or a $1,500 plane ticket. And look at, you and I are literally on opposite ends of the fucking country, and we're talking.
Right.
So let's be real honest. Like some of this stuff, there really needs to be a solid look at how this is being managed. I
Hmm.
do believe that there are far too many administrators taking money out, and really what it boils down to is that my view of it is that I would like to see a lot fewer portions of the government. And I really think that it needs a solid audit to see where things are being spent, because
Yes.
there's so much money that gets spent on administrative stuff. What that means is that you're not actually getting product, you're not actually getting services. You're literally just paying for bodies.
Yeah.
And those bodies, I'm not saying they don't provide some level of service, but the more administration you have, the less you actually spend on the issue that you're claiming to spend money on. And
Mm.
that's the reality, is that you have, when you have that many levels of administration, each level requires more money, because
Yeah.
you have to administrate the administrators, and then you
Hmm.
have to administrate the administrators who administrate the administrators. And the
Don't forget
more
their
that you do that,
benefits.
the more that you do that, the more money that you spend on things that are not actually, But by having, something that's a lot more decentralized, you're now actually working on management, you're actually providing better benefit, and
Mhm.
you're actually going to be able to make a difference and an effect. Like, for example, this is a tough one, like national parks, for example. National parks are always going to be a tough one. National parks need more money to keep themselves running and up to date. But, national parks are spread out all over the country. There's not
Mhm.
like a vast majority in one or the other. I
Right.
mean, there's a lot on the western side, yeah, but there's also a lot of national parks on the eastern side.
Oh yeah.
So this is where the idea of decentralizing, or moving a government agency doesn't necessarily making sense, because you're essentially, what you're going to be doing is building a new office, spending a bunch of government money to have the same level of administration, just in a different part of the country. That doesn't make any sense. You've
Right.
already got you've already got something built and and as administrating from there. The question is you need to sit down and audit it, and how
Hmm.
much money is going to waste, and that's the real question.
Yeah, because I believe that I would not agree with Rick Scott on a great many of things that should be eliminated.
And that's the thing, is like, I have not seen what his list is, so I have no idea what all he said needed to be eliminated.
Yeah, no, and I'll put I'm just going over the headlines of his proposals. Like I'll put the link in the chat so other people can read it further. Like, okay, so number one, he wants to reform education. And what that says right here is we will inspire, let's see, what do we got? We will inspire patriotism and stop teaching the revisionist history of the radical left. Our kids will learn. That's number one on his agenda for Republicans.
Okay, so basically he wants right-wing propaganda to be taught instead of left-wing propaganda.
Or
Or
no propaganda or none.
I'm no, the fact is that, that whole, like, patriot history. Oh, fuck off with that shit. I
Oh,
know
okay.
exactly what that means.
The 1776 project.
Right, exactly. It's like, look, I'm not.
Yeah.
When you look at history, this is the reality that people don't tend to understand. History might be written by the winners, but there's still the loser's side and story that needs to be told as well. And yeah, it's hard to sit down and say, okay, what of this is just, patriotic embellishment, and what
Hmm.
of this is just, the loser being butthurt and embellishing on the defeat that they took,
Right.
rather than, understanding that objectively, the experience is awful, and that, people like me have a lot to appreciate based on how our world has progressed. There are a number of people who have not gotten to progress in the same way. And you have to be able to understand how that history has worked. I mean,
Agreed.
what are we going to tell people about slavery, for example? Are we going to sit down and say, oh no, America is great because it was built on slavery? You're going to be an idiot if you say that.
Well, the South says slavery was a good thing, that white people came and gave these people a place to live and work, and they treated them well and gave them
No.
everything they needed. You know, they celebrate it in certain towns in the South. I think in Georgia, they have a slavery day where they have black people doing the Uncle Tom sort of thing. A thank you, thank you, thank you. um,
Yikes.
I think school is based more on an outline as to where they show you a bunch of topics that are possible for you to continue learning, but they will never have the in-depth ability to teach anybody enough of anything to make them radicalized in one way or another. You know what I mean? We might learn about slavery on a half a page, but we also might learn about the founders papers. I never learned about that in school.
Hmm.
You have to have a further education to be radicalized in one way or another. You know what I mean? So school isn't going to do that. If they're talking about slavery, it's a very polished version of it. And if you want to learn more, you have to go continue your education, you know?
Right. And I think that's, and that's, like anything else, like our history needs to be very neutral. Yes,
Hmm.
we arrived by, several ships from several different countries, but we
Sure.
also have to acknowledge that in order for us to live in those areas, we did have to kill Native American populations in order for us to take any sort of foothold.
Right.
And that those policies literally became a governmental policy. Manifest
Hmm.
Destiny, for example.
Sure, sure, sure. But it wasn't just America at that time. You know,
Oh yeah, no.
it was a slavery was a boom, a thing that started happening all over the place. White people started exploring and they found that brown people had brown servants.
Mhm.
And they were like, we want that. So they started stealing brown people around the world, and brown people enslaved brown people too. And slaves in America were Muslim, they were Asian, they were black, they were poor, mentally challenged white people. Slaves weren't demographically black, they weren't monolithically black, but in this day and age, we really need to let people know that the way we treated a majority of the black slaves, because
Mhm.
they were 70-80%, but there was other people in there too. You know what I mean? But we need to get people to understand that black people weren't the problem, and they're not the problem. And I don't understand why denying that past is a good thing. You know what I mean? I want to know everything, but that's me.
And that's and but what it boils and then what it also boils down to is, everything is become so polarized, and there's grand opinions on all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like critical race theory is one of my favorites. Like there's no high school or middle school or elementary school that's going to teach critical race theory.
Right.
Why? Because you don't have educators in those roles that understand critical race theory, and it's
Right.
taught maybe in a couple of colleges. And the reality is that, like I've said multiple times, if you know anything about something called the Three-Fifths Compromise, welcome to the gateway to critical race theory.
Sure. I mean, we're studying everything all the time. We're analyzing everything all the time. We're analyzing how laws affect race, how they were used against minorities. That's just something people do. It's called thought. It's called thought. You know what I mean?
And don't get me wrong, there are people that are going to take it too far one way or the other.
Hmm.
Any type of supremacy is a bad thing. Let's be
Sure,
real honest.
but if you're standing in a store and you see a black man get tackled to the ground by a police officer and you think to yourself, I wonder if that was justified. Yeah, that's critical race theory. You're considering the way the law is being used against a minority. And even if you're in your own personal life, you're still doing it. Like, I didn't get treated like that. Why does he get treated like that? Oh, I'm glad he gets treated like that. Or I'm not glad. That's critical race theory.
Right. And that's the real answer is that, out of all of this stuff, it's that, you have to look at it objectively. And
Yeah.
there's going to be people on multiple sides that are going to be pissed at the data and the results that are collected. and
Hmm.
and that's and that's okay, because oftentimes, we think we know what the answer is, and then when we start to collect the data, suddenly it's like, oh shit, that doesn't look anything like what I thought it would.
Right. But we're not doing these things to blame white people. Like, we're not thinking about that police officer tackling that black guy as a racial issue. We're just like, why is it affecting minorities more? But we're not seeing the white officer as the blame. It's the system we're blaming, not the individual white people. And I think a lot of white people are scared that they will have a guilt of culpability when it comes to slavery. That's not what it's about. We're not blaming the white people in 2022 for the past white people that did things, but we do want to balance the system a little bit so it doesn't overly attack one group over another. And that's
Exactly.
just it.
And that's the reality is that you have to objectively look at the system. You have to look at it all the time, because you have
Hmm.
to see what's changing.
Yeah.
That's You look at drug laws, for example, like marijuana is one of my favorite ones, simply because, like, alcohol is legal but was prohibited, and we saw how that played out.
Yeah.
Marijuana, it got it became illegal to use, and
Mhm.
when you look at the demographic of who got arrested for it, at some point that demographic changed, and people started going, oh shit, we're getting a lot of people across the board that are getting arrested for this. Well, maybe we need to look at how we're dealing with this.
But the popular the popularization of the word marijuana was a trope used against the Latino communities that it was coming from. Like it
Hmm.
was coming from Mexico. So Mexicans, they must be using it. Let's call it marijuana, to give it that Latino spin. So we suddenly hate Latinos for marijuana. But it turned out, Jeffrey, we love Latinos for marijuana.
Well, it turned out too that we also had a bunch of white people bringing weed in from other parts
Uh-huh.
of the world,
Yeah.
like
So we called it
Pakistan.
cannabis. So we called it cannabis.
Hmm. It's like, oh, hey, it's weed.
Right. That's exactly the point. So, okay, number two is awesome because I think this is something we can all get on board on. And it is we are going to eliminate racial politics in America.
I think that's
Color,
important.
colorblind equality. I love this. And it's from a Republican.
Well, great. I mean, it should be, but that's once again, when it comes to the politics side of it, you have to look at the lens of how it's affecting people.
Mhm.
Any 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 political action that you take, you're going to have to back up that it has a neutral effect on any particular race. And the only way that you're going to be able to do that is number one, input from a vast body of people, and number two, data that shows that what you have tried to implement actually works. So that's something to keep in mind, is that it's not going to be just enough to to pass something that's going to make it neutral. You're going to have to collect data on it and ensure that it is staying neutral, and whatever is affecting that is going to change. And I think that when you look at it, this is something that we've talked about multiple times, is that you have the left that inherently thinks that black people are going to vote Democrat, and it's a weird idea, because I think we all know that there's a large group of black conservative Christians out there that they're not going to vote Democrat.
Yeah.
Or there's a number of a lot of Latinos that come across, they're very religious and conservative, and the idea that
Mhm.
they're going to vote you know, for Democrats just because they're brown is really weird.
Right.
It's like,
Oh,
a lot of them like they have beliefs pretty much similar to where I grew up. And it's like, there's no way that they're going to look at that and look at, Democratic Party and go, yeah, no, I'm totally going to vote for that.
yeah. What Cuban is coming from socialism to vote for socialism? You know what I
And
mean?
and so that's one of those things, like
Yeah.
both parties need to understand that they've got to get away from this weird idea that people of color are going to vote for Democrats and only white people are going to vote for
Mhm.
Republicans, but that as a Republican, your policies have to gear towards white people, and as Democrats, your policies have to act like they're going to gear towards everybody, but then only gear towards white people.
Right. Well, I think to
uh
myself, we don't want to talk about color when we're the people benefiting at the moment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We're on the top of the food chain. Stop telling us about that we are,
Well,
you know?
and it goes back to this whole concept that we have to get back to the reality that American was an ideal. It was never supposed to be a color or a creed
Right.
or anything like that. It's and until we all get back to that idea that the person that we disagree with is American,
Right.
um, that's going to be a hard sell, because you have groups of people out there right now that, because they disagree with each other, they call each other un-American, and that doesn't make any sense.
Right. No, I
So
I think there's certain white people that see the white savior complex as in I'm a rich white guy, I will help you. Like you don't have to complain. I'm here to help you. And I think minorities, colored people, black people, brown people, they just want to help themselves. They don't want a handout from Rick Scott. They want
right.
you to remove the barriers that stop them from becoming a Rick Scott.
And to me, that idea of removing barriers is exactly what, that needs to be a part of that discussion for
Hmm.
Democrats and Republicans, because
Yeah.
they both have different barriers that they've put up in place in order to stop certain things, and that's a problem.
Hmm. I think what Kajanji Brown Jackson is an awesome version of that right now. Like um, Biden could have nominated anybody, the most qualified person, but he chose to emphasize a black woman because she was underrepresented. And see, I hear voices before I see people. And when she was talking, all I heard was like Vanessa Huxtable as an adult. And I just saw that, I looked up at the screen and saw this big smile. And I was like, oh, she's adorable. And she's smart as fuck too. And so I like the fact that he picked her. Like, I'm a disability advocate. I would love to see somebody disabled on the court. No, you take your place, KBJ. You know what I mean? Go ahead and do it because you're awesome. I'm really excited for her. I just wanted to slip that in. So, number three, of course, is we are going to enforce the laws that we have, and we're going to increase the penalties for theft and violent crime. So I don't think he wants to reform. He was part of the criminal justice reform, him and Cory Booker, the two
Hmm.
black guys in the Senate, they put on the crime bill and they couldn't come to a consensus. So I think it's real weird that like a year after that discussion for compromise, he comes out with this. We're going to be harsher. We're going to be harsher to people. And I think it goes right along. If you're not going to think about the laws and how they are affecting people negatively, then you just want to enforce the laws harsher across the board? Or do you think they might disproportionately continue to affect the same people they've been affecting?
They're gonna continue.
Yeah.
Here's the reality. You have what is called officer discretion. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have officers that have the ability to take someone who stole some, I'm going to go with a classic example. Let's say that you have two different people steal the same thing from Target, for example. One's white, one's black. The reality is that even by the DOJ's own information, black people are going to be most likely sent off to jail more frequently than their white counterparts are.
Yep.
And that's unfortunate. Now, if you're going to remove that discretion, and it's no matter what, the person who's going to steal is going to go to jail, then okay. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with it simply because um, personally, I think we have way too many people in jail as it is, and you're not addressing why somebody is stealing. Violent offenses, on the other hand, yeah, okay, that actually needs to be addressed, and actually needs you have that need for people to be in jail over things like that, like domestic
Yeah.
violence, for example.
Public safety, but still a police officer has a discretion of what he calls violent.
Exactly, and so you have to address that issue at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to me, you have to be more willing to take the actual violent crimes and jail them.
Yeah. On a path to reform. And I also believe
Hmm.
that if we if we demonize police officers in the media and don't promote the good officers, then I think we just come with an understanding that the base standard of a police officer is corrupt and evil. And if we don't promote good officers and highlight them and let them know that they're on a pedestal for us, they won't attempt to be on a pedestal for us. They won't try and be better. To be the best cop in a corrupt system is still bad, right? Because we don't promote them. But there's 95% of the police officers out there are really good, honorable people, and we don't say that enough. We just broadcast the Derek Chauvins of the world and say
Hmm.
that's what police officers are like. That's not what it's like. And police officers stood up against him and said it was wrong. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it's not about the crimes, it's about the standardization of the crimes. You know, if
And
you're going to
that's
consider
yeah.
one guy looking at you wrong as a violent act, but another guy is just a timeout, yeah, that's a real issue.
Exactly, and that's so unfortunately, like anything else, I still think that one's not addressed. I think it's just going to affect one group of people more than another unless you actually take away the ability for an officer
Yeah,
to make their own determination. It's like, look, this is what the accusation is. Here's the evidence. Boom.
right. And I know it sounds stupid, but I always believed that we should privatize cams. If a police officer has to wear a cam, what do they call them? A vest
Body
cam
cam.
or a body cam? I think we should privatize those, and we should also have body cams. And then it's our video against his video. You know what I mean? And I know it's a shitty world to live in, but we live in an evidence-based world, and sometimes your word isn't going to be taken the same because of the systemic problems of our criminal justice system.
And that's, I mean, and that's the tough part about that is that
Mm-hmm.
by asking, by asking citizens to turn on body cams, and like this weird idea like right now floating around about having cameras in school classrooms,
No,
like
what? Yeah, who wants? I'm sorry.
that's just a, like, it's this weird, at some point, like, what you have to agree to is that, look, we're all getting standardized education,
Mm-hmm.
and that standardized education is for the most part pretty fucking, like, it's as bland as flour for the most part,
Right.
you know um but if you like, the people that think that their kids are learning fucking critical race theory in kindergarten, that's insane.
But they are complaining about something.
They're
They're just misusing the term critical race theory. They still have an issue with being blamed for racism when they
here's
continue it, you know?
right. So here's my answer is that if you are that concerned about what your kid is being taught, then you need to pull them out and put them in homeschool.
Yeah, or
Because
charter school.
yep, because otherwise, like, what you're going to do is you're going to be the Karen that upends
Mhm.
everybody else's education
Right.
and time and pulls everybody else down, rather than actually dealing, actually letting teachers teach.
Yeah. And
Like,
and
we all got the same, I wouldn't say we all, like, a lot of us got the same fucking textbooks, and in some cases some of those textbooks have been used for like 20 fucking years.
yeah, and not one of my textbooks ever blamed me for racism. I
Right.
can't remember a time when I was like, "Oh, I'm racist." I had the choice to learn things that others didn't, and I got a
Mhm.
chance to expand on that. But Ron DeSantis surveilling the innocent is never anything the good guys have ever done. You know? Like,
It's and this weird idea that the government is your friend is just absolutely bonkers to me. But
yeah. How do a
every
group of people that distrust the government over trust the government?
it's easy when you really truly believe that your party is the only one that's ever going to make things right or make America America again. And it's indoctrination is what it is.
Yeah.
And look, like, I get it. There's this idea that, there's this idea that every government that comes into power is going to radically change, your way of life. And here's my response to that. If you're worried about the government radically changing your life, then stop voting for idiots that are radically changing somebody else's life.
Mm-hmm.
It should be really boring, really lame administration of collective ideology.
There used in the 60s, believe it or not, there was a homogenization of representation to whereas there was the Dixiecrats that were on the Democrat side, and there was like the moderates, like the Rockefellers on the Republican side. And somebody said, we're not getting enough donations because we're not as diametrically opposed to each other as we should be. But there was a consensus of normalcy until they realized that they needed for profit to separate the parties, and now they've just polar opposited each other. But I think they're
Mhm.
coming back. I just want to say, I think they're coming back. The moves by Vladimir Putin, I think, is really making a stark contrast. Like, there is no middle ground between communism and democracy. You're either for democracy or you're for communism. So we talked about number 4 really quick, and it was immigrations.
Mhm.
Nations have borders, and so we should finish the wall and name it after Donald Trump. Do we have anything really to say on that other than ha 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 ha?
No,
Okay.
other than no, just no, no, and no. Like, understand that, yeah, nations have borders, yes, and clearly this moron has forgotten what $100 ladder will do, or the fact that it got built so badly that a section of it just got fucking blown over. Look, you're going to convince. you're going to have a better time convincing me if you say, hey, look, let's use some modern technology to, number one, find people, and number two, track them,
Mhm.
than you are if you think that building a wall is somehow magically going to stop this.
Right?
No, what stops it is being able to surveil your border a lot easier and be able to figure out where people are, so that way you can pinpoint where they're crossing. And it's going to
Mhm.
save you a lot more time and a lot more manpower than building a fucking wall that somebody is either going to A, climb over, or B, dig under.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that Ukraine would have been saved if they had built a wall?
Oh, fuck no. Are you kidding?
Do you think Cuba would be safe if they built a wall from us? No.
No.
Borders
The
don't borders prevent progress, you know? They just they eliminate things. They restrict things. That's what they're there for.
and the reality is that you're going to have a lot you're going to have a lot better picture of who's crossing where with
Hmm.
upgraded surveillance technology than you are with a fucking wall, because people are going to go underground in order to avoid the wall. And if you have surveillance technology, people are going to be less likely to dig underground. And number two, you're going to have an easier time figuring out where people are on one side and where they're popping up on the other side if they are digging
Yeah.
underground.
Again, surveilling the innocent is never anything that anybody good ever did. I
So,
don't,
for
why do we need to care where they are? We should just be happy that they're coming here to work and going back home. Like we talked about earlier, right? Open border thing.
so yeah, people might be coming across, but look, you know it's like, all right, let's help you get a green card, and if you don't have a
Yeah.
job in 90 days, you got to go back.
And I want to say for the record, Democrats deport more people than any Republicans ever have. Obama and Biden have restricted, denied, or deported more immigrants, more migrants than any Republican ever did.
Hmm.
They just did it.
So I mean, and let's be real honest. Anybody who has ever read about how people get across from Baja California into California proper,
Mm-hmm.
they're digging underneath the fucking border wall there, and tunneling into other people's houses. Like,
Right.
okay, so you got a fucking wall there, and look at what's happening.
Yeah. El
Or
Chapo had caves everywhere. He had tunnels
or the
everywhere.
or the narcos who are literally building fucking, you know, drone submarines to sail drugs across the Gulf into different areas.
Right. Yeah, I've seen those. Colombia had those.
So so to me, that's the funny part is that, you literally have the case for why enhanced surveillance makes more sense than a fucking wall.
I agree on because here's what I think. There's fentanyl in Mexico. We need to stop it, but we can't get into Mexico to do anything about it because there's this border preventing us from actually dealing with it. And that's what
Right.
bugs me. You tie the war on drugs to the war on immigration when neither war has to be fought. If you got rid of the border, you could step over it and say stop before it came here. You could talk to Mexico and say, "Hey, guess what? We got to work together because there's no border."
Right. Actually be able to sit down and go, hey, Mexico, this is where we got people crossing right now. And those
Yeah.
people that we found, we were able to stop them, get them. They had a ton of fentanyl on them.
Yeah.
So here's
And we
the
track.
evidence that shows where they're coming from. We were
Yeah.
able to follow them from point A to point B. I need you to do something about what happened at point A. We got point B taken care of. You know,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is like, no Democrat has been and very few Democrats, I should say, are anti-border enforcement.
Right.
That's the issue. It's
That's the
that
point where they prove that they're American.
yeah, it's just that, the Democrats by and large said, no, that's a waste of resources. How about we actually create enhanced surveillance, and that way we can figure out where
Right.
people are crossing.
And how about if we go after the criminals and not the people that are just here?
So yeah, that one is really fucking dumb.
Yeah, all right. You know how I feel about border. So how about this? Wait, where did it go? It is okay, economy growth. Explain this one to me. We will grow America's economy and starve Washington's economy. Now, I think we all want that. Jeffrey is the libertarian. That's your breadbasket, right?
Yep. Yep.
Doesn't that
So
go under like closing down institutions and stuff like that? Or does that mean, what would that mean to you?
what would that
Starving
what,
Washington's
what
economy.
that means is what to me what that would mean is ideally, if it was actually true, is that you would have a lot of bureaucratic red tape that gets cut, so that way you could do more business globally and be able to have American products be sold a lot faster and a lot better than the way that the current government handles it, because the government does weird things in terms of being able to export
Okay.
to different areas. So basically allowing the American people to choose their markets which they sell, versus letting the government choose their markets. And basically the way that I see it is, if we're going to look at restrictive measures on selling, what
Mm-hmm.
would make sense is that the government goes, okay, you can't sell to North Korea. Okay, you can't sell to Iran. Okay, you can't sell to Russia. And that's, and basically what it boils down to is that, you know, you have you have some issues where you'll have some countries work as third parties, where they'll buy something from you and then they'll move it on to Russia. And
Yep.
I mean, China has done that consistently, where they'll,
Mm-hmm.
we have sanctions on North Korea, so
Yep.
China will buy something from us and then they'll send it on to North Korea.
Right. Cuba too. Cuba
Yep.
does work on airplanes of North Korea, right? We caught
Yep.
a, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. What I see and what I hear him saying is politicians' salaries should be based more on the deficit, right? Like they shouldn't get a raise as long as there's a deficit.
They
If we're
shouldn't get
not
paid as long as there's a
right,
deficit.
like
Absolutely, I would agree with that.
their pay should be tied to the GDP and the deficit and the benefits of their community. You know what I
I
mean? We
would.
should all
That makes
share in it.
sense. That
And
makes sense.
we should start cutting their insurance down a little bit. We should start budgeting based on that. Right? Where is the budget most bloated? Let's start with Nancy Pelosi's stock sales. Anyway,
Hmm.
here's wait, oh, elections. Let's go with elections here. How about that? Government
Hmm.
reform, free and fair elections. Today's Democratic Party is trying to rig elections and pack the courts because they've given up on democracy. I think I just want to add that one in because it's a bunch of rhetoric and I don't have, I mean, I just want to say what?
Uh, I'm going to go with I'm going to go with both parties looking at each other and saying no, you, because
Yeah,
it's the Republicans do the same fucking thing. It's
right.
no different. It is absolutely no different. And we could absolutely make that discussion of, you know, how would you reform elections in order to be more fair or more cohesive? And the answer would be as I would do away with political districting boundaries,
Mm,
and you would
yep.
have what you would have is you would have a statewide vote that would go, and you'd say, okay, I'm going to vote Republican or Democrat based on these particular issues. And then based on that, you would find out who's voting Republican, who's voting Democrat, and then that's how you would build your representation.
Yeah.
So places like North Carolina might go more Democrat one time, but then, in, let's say, 4 years, they might go more Republican, more conservative.
Mm,
And
right.
then from there, what you would do is, okay, here's the platform. You voted on the platform. Now you have to choose the people who are going to represent you on that platform.
Right.
So rather than doing this weird, we're going to vote for the person and hope they uphold the platform,
Uh-huh.
here's your platform. This is what you're sticking to. Now, Republicans, here's your group of people who are going to vote for the platform. Democrat, here's your group of people who are going to represent that platform. And I think that would make it a lot more fair, and that you would actually have fair representation without boundaries. And so, how, based on how many ever representatives you get, how many ever senators you get, at a certain point you'd have to have a cutoff where, let's say, you've got two senators 50-50, so one senator is going to be Democrat, one senator is going to be Republican. But let's say that, at 70-30, for example, like let's say a state votes 70-30, or 75-25, whatever, however you set that up,
Mhm.
that would mean that both of the senators from that state are going to be Republican, or both are going to be Democrat. And then that way, what you end up having is a more likely representation, rather than, you have a weird fucking these wonky districts that lean Republican or lean Democrat because of how they've managed to draw them. It doesn't, like,
Right.
that sort of shit is just weird and crazy, because it doesn't actually lead to representation. It leads to, you know, a partisan representation, and
Mhm.
it's straight up gerrymandering. So
I
if
think
you want
there
to get
should
rid of
be
gerrymandering, what you actually have
everyone
to
does
do,
that.
is you have to have people vote for the platform,
Mhm.
and then you'll have to let people choose the representatives after that are going to represent them on that platform. And then that way, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
for the Democrats, this is who's representing us. For the Republicans, here's who's representing us.
I would like to take the R&D off of local politics altogether. I wish people couldn't run on being a Democrat or a Republican, but had to run on their record and experience and plans. That's
I
for
would
me.
like that too, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah, I know. And then there's proportional representation, which I always like. The Center for Election Science has a lot of great ideas on
Mm,
approval voting, proportionate voting, just some really good stuff. So number 8 here is the nuclear family is crucial to civilization. It's God's design for humanity, and
propaganda and
it
bullshit,
needs to be protected.
and religion, and
Right. Thank you. Let's remove.
that's
I
I
mean,
don't
God has a place, but it isn't in my fucking government, right?
is separation of church and state, and this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
neither. So that's insane. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah,
it's under
I have
family.
nothing against a person who wants to have their nuclear family. I think that's great and
Right.
fantastic. But but the libertarian me says, I just want gay couples to protect their trans kids and their weed with fully automatic weapons, and this does nothing to advance that.
Yeah, I don't want a
So
definition on what a nuclear family is. I want that open to the family to decide.
yeah, when the government decides who's a family, that's not a good deal.
Right. And that's going to go. I'm going to throw this one in here now. Number 9, it's gender and life science, which is men and women are biologically different, made male and female. He created them. What? Wait, what? Sorry, I should have read that one in advance. Male and female, he created them. Modern technology has confirmed
It's
what? Oh my
It's more
God.
Christian propaganda bullshit.
I'm sorry about that one. I
No,
had
that one's a
read that
mess.
one earlier, but I was like, what is going on here? So sorry.
That
Um,
one's
they they
that one's
believe there's
bullshit.
only two genders, and God decides what they are, a guy that we've never met and probably doesn't exist. So let's just go with, yeah, leave us alone. Religious liberty and big tech, the Democratic Party and their big tech allies are not merely secular, they have virtually created a new religion.
That's insane.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting more insane as we go along. Is
Yeah,
there
so
an
I was actually just thinking the same thing. Like, this is like literally going through like the 7 levels of hell.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like,
Um,
I'm sorry, but the libertarian in me says, look, if you want a platform that's going to uphold your values, then you have to create that platform and adjudicate it properly. So if there's a reason why, when dating sites you have places like Christian Mingle.
yeah, and JPEG, JDate, whatever.
Yeah, and JDate, and there was one that I got an ad for that was for Hindus to find their partners, and I'm like, okay, weird one to come across my feed, but sure, okay. And that's the thing is that if you want a platform that's going to be more religion centric, then you need to
Mhm.
create that platform. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to see the same shit pop up in any platform that you're going to have people that are, that claim to be Christian and then start spouting racist bullshit. You've
Yeah,
got people who are going to sign up and just be trolls, and
yeah,
you're going to have to adjudicate that the way that you want to. The reality is that this is not exactly your claim versus what reality is are very different. In fact, there was a study done about uh, on how Twitter handles different pieces of information. And surprisingly, Twitter tends to lean more conservative.
Yeah.
So the reality is that, you can make all the claims that you want, but I go with the Sagan standard. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. You don't have
Yeah.
proof that that's the issue. You
Right.
have you have what you have your feelings, and I believe that you were the party that said fuck your feelings.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
So here's the reality is that, you know people keep people do not understand the fucking the First Amendment at all. The government cannot censor you. These are
Right.
private entities. They get to choose what's on their site. I don't agree with it a lot of the time,
Right.
but it's their choice. And you're the one that is literally signing up for a free site, and that isn't free because the cost is your data, and you're the one that is exposing yourself as a religious zealot.
Right. Because one side is like, yeah, go ahead. You have the freedom to believe what you want. And the other side is like, thank you, we will, but you can't. It's just so fucked up to me. And just, I don't know if people understand what human nature is, but if you get a group together, that group will divide because you don't believe 100% of everything that everyone else believes, and you will fracture and you will become two groups and then you will become 10 groups because that's the way human nature works. You can't just say that one group is homogenous. There is no monolithic version of the American where there's 350
Nope.
million of us and we're all different. And the
Right.
last one is America first. America will not be dependent on any country, and we will manufacture everything here, and we won't trade with anybody. These are your Republicans. We wondered what their plans were, right?
That
This
is,
is this is just
look,
the base list of 11.
here's so uh, there are some benefits to thinking about America first. It's kind of that a whole idea of when you're on an airplane and something happens, you have to put your mask on first in order to help somebody else.
Sure,
Because
sure.
if you're struggling to get your kid's oxygen mask on and you fail to do that because you suffocate,
Mm-hmm.
then two people are going to die rather than one.
Yeah.
We saw that with, COVID, for example, with a lot of the supplies that we needed. We relied on another country to give us those supplies, and when they had to fight the same issue, we didn't have jack shit available to us. There
Right.
is some, and now we're seeing it with semiconductors, which is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely some viability in thinking about how you're going to supply and take care of your country first. Absolutely.
Of course.
If you don't think China does that, let me tell you about forced technology transfer, because that's
Yep.
exactly what they're doing. They are thinking about their country first, and they are forcing companies to transfer technology. Now,
Yeah.
that said, as much as I hate to quote Ben Shapiro, there is one thing that he has always said. When it comes to supply deficits, as an individual, you're always going to have a deficit with the grocery store. Think
Okay.
about that for a second. The grocery store isn't just going to come to you and be like, hey, I'm going to buy your thing. No, you're always going to have a supply deficit with a grocery store, because your exchange is I'm giving you money, you're giving me my stuff that I'm wanting. And that's how it should work is that, if there's something from China that we want, there should be an exchange of money. We get what we want, period, end of story.
Right. Yeah.
The issue at hand is how we're spending money on ourselves internally and running up a debt. For
Mm-hmm.
us, wars in other countries, turns out they're pretty fucking expensive, and they don't exactly lead to as much income generation as you want. Whereas if you manufacture a bunch of stuff to sell outside, it turns out you tend to make some money off of that.
Right.
And so for America, there are some things that we have to include. And if you're going to, do that whole well, America first bullshit, okay, then great. Let's start with energy independence. Let's start with an electrical grid that is
Yeah.
modernized, that has more forms of energy connected to it, that reduces its reliance on energy sources from outside countries. Absolutely. As I have
Right.
said multiple times, the idea that the Saudis could literally cut off production, tank our economy, is a problem.
It is. And it's another problem that Republicans support the Saudis' endeavors. Like, wasn't it Mitt Romney that lost an election because he shipped jobs overseas? Isn't it always Republicans that are getting caught shipping jobs overseas? And so to say America first is just saying, hey, we screwed up to me.
Well, and there's, I mean, they both jobs overseas, and then the funny thing is that both of them get caught,
Hmm.
hiring the quote unquote illegal immigrants, and
Right.
so the
God, it
reality
comes
is,
back to the border thing again. God damn it.
so the reality is that I absolutely agree that we shouldn't be dependent on any country,
That's
any other
right.
country. I think that that's important, and I think that we have the ability to be a production powerhouse, but
Hmm.
that strategically we have shipped stuff overseas to places like China, Taiwan, South Korea, Vietnam,
Yep.
Thailand. We have done that because it is cheaper to do manufacturing in those countries.
That's
Period.
where
End
the
of story.
resources are. I mean, the nickel and titanium aren't here. They're in Ukraine. Let's have Ukraine manufacture it so we don't have to ship buckets of titanium here. Right. And that's how we started doing it. But that's how we lost out.
And you either have to bring the resources in and manufacture it here, or you have to set up your manufacturing where the resources are going, or where it's easier to get them.
Right.
And that's the honest answer. But it wasn't just that they set it up where the resources were. In terms of raw materials, they set it up where the resources cost less, i.e., human
Hmm.
capital.
Well, yeah, they set up in China, even though maybe Taiwan has a resource because it's easier to ship it to Taiwan or to China from Taiwan and then have cheap labor. Yeah. We
AKA
invest in
slave labor.
we invest in communism. We invested in Russia. We invested in China. All the strength they have comes from a capitalism, a global capitalism, right? Like they
Mhm.
couldn't have become what they are, the force they are, if we didn't give them the money to do what we do there.
if
Like
we yeah if
imagine if
we didn't if we didn't
Mexico,
ship if we didn't ship the jobs over there.
right?
Absolutely.
Or wait, if we accepted $1 more for our back scratcher that was built in Mexico, and yeah. So I don't like America first. I like America's first. Can we change that to America's first?
I personally wouldn't mind that, but at the same time,
Yeah.
it's like they're not going to do that. and
No.
and their version of America first is, well, my policies first.
Yeah. Me,
uh,
my people.
and
Shut up.
and that's bullshit. It's like, look, it has to be, number one, our people and our American people, and it
Yeah.
has to be things that benefit the greater good. And those things are, for example, there is no reason why we shouldn't be the powerhouse producing renewable energy. There is no reason why we shouldn't have on-demand nuclear sources. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to, number one, sell new electric cars, number two, sell conversion kits so that way our older vehicles can get upgraded to be electric.
Yeah.
There's no reason why, with the amount of oil that we have that we're exporting, that we should be bringing oil in from any country.
Right. We shouldn't be dependent on it.
You know,
But
so
I just think that the border is a stupid designation of where progress should stop. If our industry needs to expand up into Canada or down into Mexico, then we should be able to do that.
well, and
We
that's the other thing
shouldn't.
too, is that even our electrical grid connects into Canada and Mexico, and we supply power both directions. So
Right.
the reality is that we need energy independence for ourselves to continue to supply to places like
Hmm.
Canada and Mexico.
And people are migrating here because it's shitty there. If we make it better there, they won't be migrating here. And believe me when I say that's a loss for America. And not being a melting pot, sending people back to their own countries to make their countries better will diminish our ability to build a greater nation. We
Well,
want that melting pot. We want the best from every country, but we need to figure out that they come here to learn, go back to teach, instead of stay here to earn.
and
So,
that's the other issue, is that when you look at some of the great industrialization, is that we had people coming in from other countries. Germany, for
mhm.
example, during their Wunderschaft, I think is what it was called, in German. Like, after we did all of our huge investments to fight off the growth of communism, they were bringing in Turkish and Greek workers in order to increase their ability to make products in Germany that could lead to their global domination as it is. There is no reason why we shouldn't be manufacturing here but having people come across the border in order to do it and make it easier for them to also go back home.
Yeah. Germany, we're running out of time, but I want to say Germany brought in over 1 million Syrian refugees, and everybody was worried about that. And it turns out they were a benefit to Germany's economy. You know why? Because people started buying things, needing things, purchasing things, working on things, filling positions, but basically driving the economy through consumerism. You know, every refugee needed a table, needed a new shirt, needed a pair of socks, needed a house, needed a lawnmower. And in that, it boosted the economy. You know what I mean? Like immigrants aren't the stress that we think they are.
Right.
Any any recommendations? Any movies? Anything you watched? Anything you
You
getting
know,
into?
my recommendation right now, I think, is that
Fuck
people need to
Russia?
take, well, I mean, Russian warship, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Um, no, I think the biggest thing that people need to do is make sure that in the midst of all of this chaos, you are taking time to keep your own mental health in check. This is something that's scary.
Yeah.
There's no question about, the insanity that life has brought upon us, that politics have brought upon us. And everybody has to be willing to take a step back, take a fucking deep breath,
Hmm.
and really think about things, and a lot of things could be solved by leaving each other the fuck alone.
Yeah. You don't know what people are going through.
And you only need to be present in their life when they ask you for help, and you only need to be helping them in the way that they're specifically asking. And that's
Yeah,
all, and that's what it boils down to. It's just like you don't want somebody involved in your life, and when you do want somebody involved in your life, you only want them to help in a way that you're specifically asking.
for sure. And the other, on that subject, when I ask somebody if they need help and they say no, I don't push the issue. I don't try
Exactly.
and force myself into a position. And I think people find it odd or that I don't care. I very much care. That's why I asked, but I'm not going to push you because I trust you because you're my friend.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
and that's what it boils down to.
Okay. I'll wrap up with fuck you, Vladimir Putin, but I love you, Russian people.
I love the Russian people, and my hope is that one day things will calm down enough, things will be great,
Yeah,
and I would love to come see you guys and experience your culture, because
me
I
too.
really do think that, based on where I grew up, I probably have plenty in common with the Russian people. They just want to be left alone to live their lives in peace and have their
Hmm.
nice little corner of the world.
It sounds stupid. My grandma was from Norway and my grandpa was from Poland, and they met here because of the invasion. And it never dawned on me how Slavic they are. Both of them come from a general Slavic community. That's kind of cool.
Wait, you're the one that wasn't from Norway was Slavic? That doesn't make any sense.
No, my grandma was from Norway and my grandpa was Polish, but they're both from that sort of realm, aren't they?
No, no, Norway is Scandinavian.
Well, yeah, but they're very Russian. They're kind of to the left of what Russia is, and Poland is kind of to the right of what Russia is, but they're all generally that I don't know how to explain the similarities in that.
I think the similarity is more so that they're all people that just they wanted their corner of peace, and anytime you have to force somebody to go somewhere else to find that, it's not a you're not the
Yeah,
hero you think you are.
you're not the hero. Yeah. All right. I love you. I'll talk to you later. Thanks for being
Okay,
here, Jeffrey.
catch you later.
Bye. Yay. I love it. All right. That's it. I got nothing else. You okay?
I'm good.